each other.
I see.
So
Okay.
we
So
can
one
have one unmute.
okay.
Okay, okay. Huh?
We're
Please.
going on mute then. Go ahead, Avinash. You got the show.
Yeah. Now let me start. Uh, Very good evening from India, and it's a good morning from California Pacific time. I very heartily welcome our today's guest speaker, Joseph Bland, who happens to be my very close friend also. Then his two colleagues, Akil Kalapala and Krishna Bhavna. So, welcome to all you three people here. So friends, I'm not going to make the same presentation what I did for last 2 days, but now let me proceed. For kind attention of the viewers, we have to follow certain etiquettes while watching the live program, which I have been repeating since last 2 days. But I had a little bad experience yesterday, and our speaker also mentioned it that there was a lot of disturbance in video. The people did not stop their video and also did not stop their voice. So please be in a quiet room or disturbance-free location. Turn off your camera to save the bandwidth. Remain muted all the time because you are not going to talk anything. You are only going to listen. So background noise will be heard by all the attendees, and that's exactly what happened yesterday. Use chat. Remember, use chat window to ask your questions. Be respectful of the speakers and other attendees. There should not be any crosstalk. It is being streamed live on NSS Nashik India chapter YouTube channel. So those, if you cannot get admitted into Zoom, please switch over to YouTube link. Our today's program agenda is, yeah, it is, I'm not going to do introduction of World Space Week, National. Uh, I would be just starting with introduction of the speaker and then requesting presentation by the speaker so that they get enough time to make their presentation. So I'll just run around. Yeah. Former President, NSA Chapter Assembly. Every second Monday of the month, the presidents and chapter leaders all over the world, they meet and discuss lot many things in space technology. So he happened to be the president of the NSA Chapter Assembly. Mr. Bland will be assisted by two more young speakers, Akil Raj Kumar Kalapala. He is a doctoral student at the University of Texas at Arlington, Dallas-Fort Worth area, and Krishna Bhavna Sivaraju. She is also a graduate teaching assistant at the University of Texas at Arlington, Dallas, Fort Worth area. These two young people were the first place winners of the 2013-2014 Sunset Design Competition. It's very important that what the National Space Society is doing for the academia, for the education, and for the students is conducting various types of competitions and contests. So if you visit the National Space Society website, you will get to know all these things. So these two youngsters had participated in those competitions and they stood first. They were the first prize winners. So they have joined us and they will be sharing the presentation. The subject of today's presentation by the eminent speaker is space solar power. It's a very revolutionary concept to generate electricity in the space and transmit it to the earth, and it's abundantly available, so there will be absolutely no shortage of power on this planet earth. Of course, our speakers are going to illuminate us on this thing. Now let me introduce the speaker, my dear friend Joseph. He has had a lifelong interest in human settlement of outer space. He has been president of the Sacramento L5 Society since 2007 and chair of the National Space Society Chapter Assembly since December 2017. A third generation inventor and creative, his grandfather founded the Pasadena, California Philharmonic Orchestra, and his father studied at Caltech in California. Joseph is the owner of 2 US patents on heat engine design and the recipient of a related California Energy Innovation Small Grant Award. Joseph and Donna, his wife of 34 years, are presently happily retired in Sacramento, California. Dear Joseph, please take over and start your presentation. Please start with your screen. I am stopping. Please continue.
Joe, you need to unmute.
Yeah. Joseph, please unmute yourself. Joseph, please unmute yourself.
Hi, guys. Sorry about that. I managed to somehow, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. I somehow managed to get myself to where I can't even see what I'm up to anymore. Oh, let's see if I can do this again and get myself back to where I wanted to be. I don't want those guys. I'm sorry about this. This is my own personal hitch now. I've managed to mess myself up. There we go. I think I'm finally getting back in sync. I haven't been able to share my screen yet, which is what I would really like to be able to do.
It's the fourth option in the bottom row. Like on the bottom bar, there is security participant.
Oh, I
chat
know
and
how
share.
to do it. Unfortunately, I've somehow managed to mess it up with my Keynote program. So I have to, I think, try to quit Keynote, back to meeting. Let's see if that works. Hey, finally, I can see you. This is a good thing. Now, share screen. Okay, so but before I do that, I don't want to share screen yet anyway. I want to talk. So my two good friends here, Akil and Krishna. Akil, you need to unmute too, please. And
Yes, Joe.
so I'm going to start with my script. Start over. Good morning from California, and good evening in Nashik. My name is Joseph Bland, and I'm the president of the local chapter in Sacramento of the National Space Society. And hold on, I want to get something going here. One other thing. I did not, unfortunately, get set up correctly here, so I'm kind of having to wing it. There. Now I'm back on sync. So today I'm joined by two young people, as you can see, Akil Raj Kumar and Kalapala and Krishna Bhavna Sivaraju. And I'm sorry if I just mangled your names, guys. I know them as Akil and Krishna. And before we get started, we'd like to thank Nashik India and their chapter of the National Space Society, and most particularly chapter president Avinash Shirode, for giving us this opportunity to speak before you today in honor of the United Nations World Space Week, whose theme this year is Satellites Improve Life. So the NSS and the SL5S and the ISDC have been, and I'll explain what those three things are here in a second. Because what I want to do is start with a brief history of these three organizations and how they managed to bring Akil, Krishna, and myself together. But before I go too much farther, I'd like to just have Krishna and Akil talk just a little bit about themselves to kind of bring you up to date upon who they are and where they are. So could Krishna, why don't you start? Ladies first, as they say, and then Akil, Akil, you can go after that. Okay.
Sure.
Hello, everyone. It's so great to see you all today, and it's so nice that we met with the Space Week. And I thank Nashik India chapter of NSS for giving us this opportunity. I am Krishna Bhavna Sivaraju. I am currently a PhD student at University of Texas at Arlington. It's been a long way. Propel what propelled me to come to PhD is what I did with at ISTCs, and what we're going to see in a few minutes, what we did for the space solar power competition and everything. So I completed my undergraduation back in India and came for PhD here.
Excellent. Okay, Akil, you're on.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Joe, for introducing me and Nashik India chapter. It's an absolute pleasure to be part of this Space Week program. It's been like more than 7 to 8 years that I have association with Joe and International Space Development Conference and National Space Society. So when I was in my undergrad, I attended the first International Space Development Conference. There I met many scientists, scholars, and researchers, and learned many things. That actually gave the spark of research and want to pursue the unknown things like space research. That's something that is very fascinating. And starting from that, I came to US in 2016 to pursue master's in electrical engineering and later to PhD. So this is almost my final year of my PhD program, working on high power lasers, optoelectronic devices for communication, like high-speed lasers and LEDs. So that's basically the photonics and semiconductor material. So I thank like Joe and my advisors over the last few years for giving me consistent encouragement and support and helping me to understand some of the new concepts. I think like all the youngsters who are interested can look up for the research opportunities and career opportunities available and talk to the NSS team, and they would be very helpful. Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Well, wonderful. And so I'm going to basically minimize my Zoom so I won't be able to see you. I'm going to, before I do that, Akil, I'm going to put you back on mute just in case. And then hopefully that way we won't have any echoing issues. I have had some work with Zoom. I actually started using Zoom on a more or less permanent basis about 3 years back as part of the chapter's assembly. And by the way, it's the chair of the chapter's assembly, not the president, but close. Effectively the president. It's just a different term. And I was that for 3 years or so, and it was quite long enough, believe me. It was a very, very tough task for me. But I think we got in a good place by the time I was done. So I'm pretty pleased with what happened there. So we learned about Zoom there, and so we'll move on from there. So without too much further ado, let's go ahead, and I'm going to attempt to open up my little slideshow, if I can find the right, there we go. Now I just have to get it to open up. There we go. There we go. So this is what we're going to try to talk about today. We're not going to hit the whole general subject of solar power in space. What we're going to talk, and basically what we're talking about when we're talking about space solar power in this presentation is power beaming. That is to say, trying to move power from one point to another point by beaming it. And you'll note that I've got the title an alternate approach, because what we're going to be looking at is not an approach that is normally at least considered in the minds of the general public. And that is using a laser to beam power. And the two folks with me today, the two young people, Akil and Krishna, basically are the two people that turned me on to this whole concept in the first place. And so as we go along, you'll understand what I mean about how they helped me out and got me sort of moving down a certain path, which I'm still kind of going down, even here years later. So I actually owe more to them, I would say, than they do to me. So that's the interesting relationship. So I'm going to go back here and we're going to start over talking about some of the history and some of the stuff that sort of forms a background for where we've gone and what we're up to here. So, so we're going to start with a brief history of the organizations that brought Akil, Krishna, and myself together in the first place. The National Space Society, of which I am part, I am the president of the Sacramento chapter of the National Space Society, originally did not begin as a single organization. It began as two organizations. The National Space Institute, which was founded in 1974, and the L5 Society, which was founded in 1975. So the National Space Institute was established by the famous rocket scientist Dr. Wernher von Braun. Its role was to encourage support in the United States for continued funding of space development. So you could talk about it or think about it kind of as the space industry trying to encourage more development in space, and he headed up that organization. The L5 Society, on the other hand, was a horse of a completely different color. And it came out of what we in the US call a grassroots movement. And that is a movement that develops organically and of its own accord. But even grass has to have a seed. And the seed for the establishment of the L5 Society was Dr. Gerard K. O'Neill. Now, Dr. O'Neill became interested in space settlements in 1969 while he was teaching freshman physics at Princeton University, where he actually became inspired by some of the papers being written by his students. And around 1970, he began working on a paper titled The Colonization of Space, which planted the seed that eventually became the L5 Society. Then in 1986, the National Space Institute and the L5 Society merged to form a common organization called the National Space Society. And by the way, one important element that the L5 Society brought to the NSS was its chapter-based organization, which the NSS, as you know, retains to this day. And my chapter, the Sacramento L5 Society, is very proud of the fact that it has been in continuous existence from within a year or two of the founding of the original L5 Society. So over the years, the primary yearly event of the National Space Society has been the International Space Development Conference, or ISDC. In 2013, the ISDC was held in the city of San Diego, California. And it was there that Akil and Krishna first introduced themselves to me. I remember sitting by myself in an open area outside the conference hotel and sipping a cold drink when these two very young people came up to me and very politely asked me for a moment of my time. And after that, we kept in touch. And in late November of 2013, we began a correspondence concerning an entry of theirs into the National Space Society sponsored contest called the Sunset Design Competition. And that was a contest that was to actually change all three of our lives. So I'm going to I'm going to stop my World Space Week keynote presentation here for a moment and switch over to Avi, can you see my screen? Am I sharing my screen just to be sure I'm on the safe side here?
Yeah.
Avi,
What did you say?
can you see my screen? Am I sharing?
Yeah, I can see you, but you have to share your screen, no?
I haven't shared it. Oh, that's what I asked. I had a bad feeling that I was doing that.
No, you have not shared yet.
Okay, this is not good. I have been running my whole thing here. Hold on a second. Let me get back in here. So I messed up. Sorry about that, folks. I didn't get to share my screen, so you missed a lot of my.
At the bottom, you have that green
Yeah,
button.
yeah, I got
Share
it.
screen.
I just failed to do it. Yeah, not my best presentation in the world today. Sorry about that. Anyway, now I'm sharing my screen, and what you'll see on my screen here is a copy off the internet of the online journal of space communication, and this is the 18th issue of the journal. And so it was quite a few years back. I don't even believe they publish in this journal anymore. But you'll see Heliostra here, which was the project that Akil and Krishna worked on. So back to my script. What Akil and Krishna created in their proposal was a masterful examination of a process for beaming useful energy from space to the surface of the Earth, and specifically to a point in the ocean off the Indian continent. They proposed a different approach to the standard idea of beaming microwave energy to the Earth's surface. Instead, they proposed beaming laser energy. Essentially, they proposed a large solar power generating plant constructed in geosynchronous orbit, which is an orbit about 35,000, 36,000 kilometers above the Earth's equator, that follows the direction of the Earth's rotation. A satellite in geosynchronous orbit stays precisely over whatever point on the Earth it sits above. Thus, this beam laser would be directed continually off the coast of India and into a large ocean water desalination plant, converting salt water into drinkable and usable water. Now, they calculated that system of theirs would actually pay back the investment required to create it. That is all of it, the offshore plant and the orbiting plant, within 7 years, which was actually quite remarkable. And of course, from then on, it would be pure profit. So Akil and Krishna were both thinking about beaming energy to the Earth. And I got to talking with them about their concept quite a bit before they finally published it. And as you can see, actually won first place. In the meantime, I was thinking about the moon. And their solution seemed to me as something very useful for solving a huge problem associated with the moon. You see, the moon, as we all know, rotates around the Earth once a month. But during that rotation, it always shows us one side only. What that means is that, in effect, the moon rotates in an orbit, or rotates around exactly once a month. I'm sorry, approximately once a month. It's not an exact. Now, as a result, any point on the lunar surface sees about half a month of sunlight and about half a month of absolutely no sunlight. So how do you get work done on the moon when there's no sunlight for half a month? Well, one way is to use the system that Akil and Krishna proposed, or kind of. There's no such thing as a geosynchronous orbit around the moon. However, there are two decent approximations. One is Lagrange point 1, and another is Lagrange point 2. So once again, I'm going to try to get back into my keynote and bring up a picture. So here's a picture, and hopefully you can see that this time, of the Lagrange points. Now, what we're looking at in this particular picture is a facsimile of the sun and the earth. But Lagrange points are any two bodies. So in effect, pretend that the sun is the earth and the little blue ball is the moon. And you'll be in sync on this. So what's a Lagrange point? In space, there are special mathematically defined points that are named after the mathematician, Mr. Lagrange. I don't remember his first name. And he's the one that theorized that they existed. They're often called L points for short. And that's why you'll see on this chart where it says L1, L2, 3, 4, and 5. And there are exactly 5 L points circling every orbiting two-body gravitational system in space. The Earth and the Moon form such a system. The Sun and the Earth form such a system. So looking at the Earth-Moon as a two-body system, Earth-Moon Lagrange point 1 is a point between the Earth and the Moon where there is an equal attraction towards the Moon and towards the Earth. And you can see the big L1 that gives you a visual idea of where that is. The terminology I typically use is, instead of saying Earth Moon, I'll say EM. So if we look at EML1, we'll see that it's inside the moon's orbit, but very much outside the, but very much farther away from the Earth than it is from the moon. So one of the most important things to note is that the Lagrange points move with the moon. So as the moon completes its orbit, they will move in syncopation with it. Wherever the moon is, that's where you'll find the Lagrange points, and that's perfect syncopation. So what creates the L1 point? It's basically what you can think of as an equilibrium point. There's an equal attraction of gravity towards the moon and towards the Earth. Thus, if the moon's orbit were completely circular, as it's shown in this chart here, a satellite that was placed at EML1 would be in equilibrium and orbit at precisely the speed of the moon, even though EML1 is an average of 58,000 kilometers closer to the Earth. But since it's well known that the closer an object is to a gravity well, then the faster it rotates, this seems to be a contradiction. Well, it's not. The moon's momentum and gravity essentially hang on to whatever is sitting at EML1, much as if a string had been tied to it from the moon. So that's L1. And L2 is a point, as you can see, on the far side of the moon. In effect, it's as if the combined gravity and momentum of both Earth and Moon create a point orbiting at the same speed as the moon, even though it's 65,000 kilometers beyond the moon's orbit. L3 is similar to L2, but as you can see, it's on the other side of the Earth. And once again, it orbits at the speed of the moon. Now, L4 is this point ahead of the moon in its orbit, and L5 is a point behind the moon. They're also sometimes called Trojan points because they're in the moon's orbital path, exactly. They're equidistant from the Earth and the moon. As you can see, it's as far to the moon to L5 as it is from the moon to the Earth. And as because of that, that means that they're equally distant from each other. So they create a triangle of 60 degrees.
Joe, you got, yeah, that's right.
Okay, so I'm going to take it back just a little bit. So basically, the EML 4 and 5 points create the 60-degree triangle between the Earth, the moon, and the point of the equidistant equilateral triangle. So Dr. O'Neill saw the 5 Lagrange points in the Earth-Moon system as incredibly important points for the establishment of space settlements, and particularly points L4 and L5. In those points, a mass that's deposited there will automatically tend to stay there. And since there's no deep gravity well keeping the settlement in place, just mathematics, that means a spaceship doesn't have to battle a gravity well when it's traveling to and from a Lagrange point. Obviously not the same case with the Earth or the moon or any other large planet. So in Dr. O'Neill's seminal book, The High Frontier, he summarized the concept of huge settlements that could be placed at L4 and L5. It was that vision of very large settlements rotating to create artificial gravity that caught fire in the United States and propelled the L5 Society into existence. It was felt that the space age was right around the corner, and folks alive might actually be living in those artificial space settlements. Hence the name of the organization, L5 Society. So at this point, let me see. I'm going to share with you the video that Akil and Krishna developed for their presentation. Oops, before I do that, I'm going to have to stop the share because I forgot to do something. And I'm going to have to restart the share and turn on sound so you can hear them. Here we go. Okay, here we go.
Our marvelous Mother Earth, the most adorable gift God has ever given to mankind, the home for billions of varieties of life forms, undoubtedly the cradle of human life. Helios, the root cause of evolution and survival of innumerable species. Heliostra.
Joe, can you increase
bridging
the
the
volume?
bondage between Helios and Mother Earth.
That's as loud as it'll
Heliostra
go.
is a creative design of an advanced space solar power system. With the thoughts conceived in our minds, we have constructed the next generation power sat, Heliostra, shining like a gifted sun for Earth. Having a
What happened?
close view over the integrated system of Heliostra, we can observe the main base with embedded components like
Joe, we
transponder,
can't hear.
radiator, amplifiers, DC
Please increase
batteries,
the
etc.
volume.
The solid-state laser transmitter to pump high-power laser beam with reflector and gain antenna, and 4 huge solar aspects.
I cannot increase the volume, okay? Okay, Avinash, I cannot increase the volume. I'm sorry, that's as loud as it goes.
Okay, let it continue.
Thank you. So I'm actually going to take it back and we'll play it again. And you'll have to strain your ears, folks. I'm sorry, the best I can do.
Our marvelous Mother Earth, the most adorable gift God has ever given to mankind, the home for billions of varieties of life forms, undoubtedly the cradle of human life. Helios, the root cause of evolution and survival of innumerable species. Heliostra, bridging the bondage between Helios and Mother Earth. Heliostra is a creative design of an advanced space solar power system. With the thoughts conceived in our minds, we have constructed the next generation power set, Heliostra, shining like a gifted sun for Earth. Having a close view over the integrated system of Heliostra, we can observe the main base with embedded components like transponder, radiator, amplifiers, DC batteries, etc. The solid-state laser transmitter to pump high-power laser beam with reflector and gain antenna, and 4 huge solar arrays spanning over 1,000 square meters of active surface area, exclusively designed to produce 1 megawatt of solar power. The saga of Heliostra starts at Satish Dhawan Space Center, Sriharikota, India, amidst the dedicated engineers and scientists. Stands vertical, the launch vehicle, carrying Heliostra to change the face of technological innovation. 3, 2, 1. Here goes Heliostra to create a new era in the history of mankind. With 3 stages, Heliostra reaches geostationary orbit, the assigned destination, when the nation, or rather the whole world, applauds. After being projected into its distant orbit, the dragon sprawls its wings. It flaps the 4 large solar arrays outside, shining like a star in the intense darkness. As apparent on the screen, we designed each Heliostra solar array to contain 15 rectangular base structures of size 5 meters length and 3.12 meters breadth, and each bay weighing around 25 kg produces 16.7 kilowatts of power. Let's go deep into the details how this mighty object is going to energize the world. Looking at its microscopic level, the base structure forming the solar cells is the quantum dots doped on gallium arsenide solar cells. This small solar cell is made up of several layers. Highly doped N-type gallium arsenide substrate, 300 nanometers buffer N-type gallium arsenide layer, 50 nanometers of gallium arsenide layer, P-type gallium arsenide layer, and P-type aluminum gallium arsenide layer. Finally, it is covered by a blanket of Fresnel lens. As shown, this Fresnel lens highly focuses the sunlight onto one point known as focal point, where our solar cells are placed. When light is incident, the photons energize the electrons in gallium arsenide base in quantum dot. There exists a potential difference. The energized electrons excite and flow through the carbon composite structural tubes and produces DC current of electric power 760 kilowatt with generation efficiency of 0.76. All these tubes are connected to a single copper conductor to energize the solid-state laser diode after being stored in the battery. The neodymium-doped yttrium-helium diode is wound with copper conductor carrying the huge power generated by the 4 solar arrays. This diode is coated with silver on one side for reflection and partially coated on the other side for laser beam production. It contains huge number of free electrons that are excited with power supply. The red excited electrons move randomly and make collisions inside the diode with high velocity. These energized electrons try to come to their ground state. For that, they release energy in the form of lasers from the partially silver-coated side of the diode. This produced laser is amplified by the amplifiers inside the Heliostra main base and produces 319.2 kilowatts of power. The laser beam shot toward Earth with transmission efficiency of 0.9 on the receiver located in the Bay of Bengal near Visakhapatnam, which receives a power of 278.3 kilowatt with power density of 0.75 milliwatts per square meter. The power delivered to Earth in the form of laser beam is captured by a disc-shaped concave or parabolic ground receiver antenna of 70 meters diameter. Again, here on the surface of receiver, high-efficient quantum dots doped solar cells are placed to capture the laser beam energy and to convert it into electricity. The produced electricity is used to energize the Earth-based seawater desalination plant based on reverse osmosis filtration technique. This plant is placed at suitable position to allow the inflow of saline water and outflow of desalinated water, and also to be convenient enough to receive the power supply. In our plant, we have designed 2 reverse osmosis chambers with membranes containing holes not more than 0.1 nanometer, through which the water flow with application of high pressure. With this, all the contaminants above the size of 300 daltons are removed and the purified water comes out. Along with the purified water, the brackish water containing all the contaminants is also released out. This water carries 98% of the velocity at the membrane. In order not to let this energy in vain, this water is redirected towards the initial cycle to rotate the wheel, which produces the pressure required. Thus, 60% of the energy is saved by this process. Heliostra is technically plausible, economically feasible, and environmentally friendly alternative to the present scenario of energy crisis of fossil fuel depletion. We propose global collaboration in order to make this huge project successful.
All right. So I'm going to stop the share for a minute. Come on back here. And I'd like us to actually have Akil and Krishna turn the mics on now and talk just a little bit about what we just saw. I understand you could not hear the video very well. I'm not responsible for that. Sorry. It
Oh,
sounded
we were
great.
able to. I was able to listen to it clearly.
Oh,
Me
really?
too.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. It was
Excellent.
audible clearly.
So later on, we'll have a little bit of a question and answer period, and you guys can talk to people who have questions about what they just saw. But in general, could you just speak briefly, one at a time? And again, we'll start ladies first. That's going to be my rule. And just speak briefly about that whole period of time, what you were going through, how you kind of evolved the concept, just some little, just brief discussion on what I consider to be a seminal concept. And oh, and I should mention before we get started, this is not really brand new stuff. It's not like nobody had ever talked about beaming a laser to generate power someplace else. What you did, though, what was interesting and unique was, first of all, you got an application that made really great sense, and you worked it all the way through and came up with the numbers that supported this concept. So taking it from that point of view, that you weren't really reinventing the wheel here, or you didn't create the wheel was already there, but what you did was see an application of the wheel. Okay, so take it from there. Why don't you start, Krishna?
Yeah, so it was actually nostalgic looking at that video and listening to you and revisiting all those days. I was like 19, 20 years old when we started this our space exploration and our association with NSS. And as you mentioned, though we were there in 2012, we met you only in 2013 during San Diego. And yeah, I vividly remember that moment. You were there near a coal fire probably, and we came up to you. And as philosophical as it may sound, but I believe one way destiny brought us there, because that whole sunset design competition happened because of you, Joe. I
Oh,
remember you emailing us back in November that we knew sunset was there, but somehow we were not so confident enough to get into the competition. You were the one who emailed us and propelled us that maybe you should participate in this, and that's when we took it seriously. And your support throughout the whole journey was immense, and I mean it with my whole heart. And we saw in the video that was the technicalities we involved in it, and it was really a lot of hard work that went into it, be it the technical aspects or the video that we made and the financial budget sheet and everything. Given our experience as only second year undergrad students, it was both exciting as well as in a way exhausting, but it was all paid off, and we stepped here in 2014 summer at ISTC again in Los Angeles, and we were able to win that. And it still gives me goosebumps thinking about that night when we won. We also had your support to do the trail runs, and it was really an exciting time. That's how it all happened, and it actually propelled my way through the career a lot. It gave me a lot of confidence, and it also made me humble after coming there, meeting all of you people who are doing a lot of good work over there. And be it meeting Dr. Kalam in 2013, or Buzz Aldrin, who was one of the first people, who was one of the first people to give the gift of landing on the moon to humanity. And all the, be it mannequins or any, all of them, they actually inspired me a lot. And that's one reason I started the PhD studies here after my undergraduation. I've been mostly concentrating on the cooling systems of the space satellite, as I'm a mechanical engineer, and now I'm currently working on the cooling systems of electronics.
Fantastic. All right. You're on, Akil. I'm going to go on mute and
Sure. Yeah, it's really wonderful to see that video again after like 5 years. So that was in 2014 we prepared that video. So the main idea of the Sunset design competition is to demonstrate a technologically feasible space solar power system. So that needs a visual presentation as well. Like apart from the technical aspects, we were also need to work on a 3D animation. So that was the hard part we faced. And for that, we took the help of our students back in Triple IT Newsweed. So they, like we have few friends who worked on 3D rendering, like using 3ds Max, Blender. So it was a very narrow deadlines we faced at that time. So like we have less than 3 months. We have the technology concept developed, but the animation, that's really hard thing. It takes a lot of time. Somehow we were able to manage that, prepared a video on like around 5 minutes. And for the technical aspects, we got an opportunity to talk to Dr. Raghavan Gopalaswamy. He's an Air Commodore. You see our in the video, we explained about the power conversion efficiency to power the desalination plant. So
whoever is talking, you need to mute, please. Thank you.
Joe, can you hear me?
Yes,
we do hear you.
Yeah, there is a demand that people are more interested in knowing how the electricity is generated in the space, how it is transmitted to the earth, and
Well,
how it is converted
okay,
into electricity again.
Avinash, we have a sort of process that we want to go through. We don't want to take questions now. We want to go through our presentation.
So
Is that okay?
Yeah, better you
Can we-
talk on laser technology.
Yeah.
We will be talking on all of that, but we need to take this in order if we can, please.
Yeah, please, please.
Okay, so hold all questions until we're done. Go ahead, Akil.
Yes, yeah, definitely we would answer all the questions from the interested candidates once we complete this explanation process. Okay, so that where I was like, yeah, Dr. Raghavan Gopalaswamy, he gave us some the real calculations about the power conversion and also to power up the desalination plant. So, and to our surprise, we got few phone calls and reviews by the former president of India, Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam. He reviewed our project and gave a lot of suggestions on how to make it more technically and financially feasible. And thereafter, so we prepared the draft and made the video and discussed with Joe also about the whole process of preparing a satellite and the launch systems, because he explained about the cryogenic technology and other engine systems that are used in other rockets. So we thought of trying a reusable launch vehicle system at that time that can have very cost efficient transportation system. So that's a few technical aspects of our project. And after that, we came to LA, Los Angeles in 2014 to give the presentation there. We met other scientists and we saw the technical concepts of other participants also. So that was a very good experience. And so you asked about the the solar cells technology and laser power technology. So that's all part of the engineering that went into the system. So the same type of technology right now, I'm working on my PhD program at UTA, University of Texas at Arlington. So we have, excuse me. So we have advanced clean room facility here where we process the semiconductor material and use it for photonic devices, like lasers and all this stuff. So that day when we started the working on the space solar power project, I never expected that I would come all the way this long to pursue such a wonderful career. So yeah, I should thank all the supporters, researchers, scientists who enlightened me about the next generation technology and the space power. So that's a wonderful experience.
I know, there, I have trouble sometimes unmuting. All right, so yeah, I want to hold off on questions until the end. I just want to briefly now talk about how important this became to me personally. As I have mentioned, I'm the president of a National Space Society chapter, and we actually had a NASA Ames employee in our chapter. Here in California, there's a NASA facility called NASA Ames, very famous. And there was what they call a brown bag lunch that they decided to start. That is to say, informal lunch. And a bunch of engineers and folks got together and they're going, there's got to be a cheap way for us to create a lunar base. And they said, let's try to figure out how to do that. And so our chapter member came back, told us about this. I said, well, listen, I've been involved with this group of students in India, and they have this really incredible idea, which I think could be applied to the moon. Why don't we, suggest to them that we would study that as our part of the sort of brown bag informal get together? And that's exactly what we did. And so we developed about a 37-page proposal, or not proposal, but analysis of all the different ways that you might want to power a moon base through the lunar night. And we were very thorough. We tried to be very, very open-minded about it. And the best by far solution was laser power from space. Now, the reason I went over the whole concept of Lagrange points is because if you want to power the moon from space, the ideal place on this side of the moon is from Lagrange point 1. It's about 55,000 kilometers away, but it is actually possible to fire a laser at the moon from there. And you don't have to orbit the moon. You just have to basically keep this thing in the general vicinity of that Lagrange point. On the other side of the moon, for the back side of the moon, there's Lagrange point 2. So you have between them, you have both sides of the moon that you're able to supply power anywhere on the surface of the moon. And so that's why we decided that this is a great solution for powering a moon base through that 2-week-long complete absence of sunlight. And so we completed our proposal, or started to get to the end of our proposal, and we stumbled on another study. And it turned out that this particular study was done by NASA itself. So, excuse me. That particular study was called the NASA JSC Lunar Surface Concept Study, and it was done in 2009. So we didn't know about it when we started our proposal, but it literally looked at exactly what we were looking at, different ways to power a lunar base, and included powering it with a laser. That was one of the things they looked at. But what happened is we looked at the problem on our own. We did not have a bias. We did not have any particular idea. So we generated I guess you could say, different solutions. So the NASA came up with one set of solutions. We came up with another set of solutions, and we were able to fold them together. And that gave us a couple of advantages. Among other things, it gave us a certain amount of hard data that NASA had already generated that we could piggyback off of. So, and in fact, it absolutely verified our conclusion that the lasers were the best way to go. That's the way you should power the moon, right there. Ever since that time, we've gone sort of slowly as a very, very small chapter. We've gone very slowly, continually in the direction of trying to push this concept. The larger concept of laser beaming and the more specific concept of using it to power, whether it's a moon base or whether it's a rover or some sort of small stationary mining settlement, something like that. It's the way to go. And it's not atomic. We don't have to, take plutonium off the surface of the Earth or uranium. We don't have to have hot, and by the way, there is no uranium or plutonium on the moon. And so there is thorium, but thorium can be used in reactors, for example, but it requires at least a small amount of uranium to be functional. So that means that if you really want to use atomic power in space, you're going to have to take it off the Earth's surface. Well, I'm not really thrilled with the idea of very highly processed radioactive material being shipped into space. I don't care what the reason is. And so for me, I think that the solar solution is something that's far, far superior. Now, it's true that as you get larger and larger, we're going to have to consider, atomic sources of energy. But at least at this stage, I think solar can fill a bill. It can accomplish everything. So where are we now with our little project? Well, we're looking at how to reach out, how to make people appreciate this concept and where it can go. And excuse me for my mornings. I'm at 6 o'clock in the morning here, so excuse the issues with my throat here. So what we did is we decided that a very small and inexpensive device with the lowest possible mass was probably the solution that we wanted to look at. So for us, we thought, well, okay, there's the Spirit rover, and I'm actually going to try to share my screen here and show a couple of slides. Oh, first of all, here's our great picture. You guys remember that? There's those guys as young people.
I don't see you there, that screen.
And I'm on the, well, if you're looking at the screen, I'm on my left. I'm the large guy. I'm the very large guy.
We can see the screen sharing.
Oh, you're not doing screen sharing? Okay, hold on. Let me get the screen share on. I'm enjoying it. I don't know why you're not. There.
Yes.
How's that? There they are receiving their award at the ISDC.
That's wonderful.
And I'm the big guy with the major grin on. And you guys look different then. You were much, much younger.
Exactly.
So anyway, back to my concept of where we're going with this. Oh, this is a picture of the NASA lunar surface concept study, first page. And you can find this on the internet. Very important paper, in my opinion, even though we tended to disagree with parts of it. So this is my point. This is the Mars Spirit rover. And the Mars Spirit rover was about, let's see, maybe 185 kilograms, I think, something like that. And required about 25 watts to operate. That's all it really needed. So what we're looking at is basically putting something on the moon or comparable to the Spirit rover that was on Mars. And that should be eminently doable by many different nations. And then to power it, instead of using a solar cell, we would use effectively a laser receiving cell that is tuned to that particular laser. The interesting thing about that is that the laser beam is converted, if it's tuned properly, with much, much higher efficiency than solar energy can be. So the actual surface area you need for a given amount of energy is quite a bit smaller for a laser photovoltaic cell than for a solar photovoltaic cell. Anyway, that's our approach. And we thought about, the main thing is to find a way to get a return on an investment. And the neat thing about this is people are going to be sending these little rovers to the moon, but when nighttime comes, they're going to have to shut down. They're not going to be able to do a darn thing. However, if we put a laser satellite up there and we shine our laser on them, we can keep them going through the whole night, through the whole 2 weeks when there's no night, which means you basically double their productivity, which means you just basically got a great return on investment. So from our point of view, that's the main deal that we focused on. And so now we're moving in the direction of looking at writing a proposal for developing a very small laser system, relatively much smaller than the sorry again, much smaller than the 15 kilowatt system we were looking at for the moon base. Basically delivering maybe 50 kilowatts. And so I've done an analysis, I've looked through the numbers, and it looks like I'm going to actually share my screen again. And I'm going to turn off Keynote now. I don't need him anymore. And I'm going to bring up a document, hopefully. That's not it. Where are you? I've lost my document. Not that one. There we go. That's the one I wanted. So this is basically our estimate, cost estimate of what we're proposing. We looked at this, and basically I looked at it in terms of how much it would cost if we put up our lunar satellite as part of a Falcon 9. It turns out that our satellite, the total package, would weigh about 250 kilograms, and that includes a rocket to get this package to the moon, because the moon, the package at the moon that would give us 50 watts on the lunar surface is only about 90 kilograms. So we got a 90 kilogram satellite orbiting the moon, and it's going to basically have to triple that in terms of getting the fuel to get to the moon in the first place. So you got to put about 250 kilograms in orbit to get this 50-watt system, continuous power output system to the moon, which is 1/100th of the mass of a full Falcon 9 payload, which, if you take the cost of a full Falcon 9 payload, which is about $600 million, is that right? No, 60 million. $60 million, 1/100th of that is $600,000. Am I right? I think I got the math on that. Math is not my strong suit. So the development process is that we would first procure these thin film plastic lenses, and we know who makes them. We know how much they cost. They're fairly specialized items. So they're going to cost me, cost us about $500 each. Total cost for 100 of them, which is what we would need, is about $50,000. The housing for the lens, another 10,000. Fairly simple, very, very extremely lightweight construction. And we have a technique for accomplishing that. We know the company that can do it. The satellite element itself, that's going to be a big ticket item. That's going to cost maybe $1 million because we don't have any satellite building capability, and this is a one-off. It's the first time it's ever been built. It's a prototype, so it's very expensive for the first time. So it's going to cost a cool $1 million to build the satellite itself, even though it's only 90 kilograms. The calculations for the lunar orbit, we already have somebody that can do that, and that's about 100K. And if you look at that as a total material manufacturing and assembly cost, we're talking about $1.16 million for the satellite design, development, construction, and then of course another $600,000 to put it up in orbit. The expenses for the team that's going to actually control this are going to be fairly high. Again, this is how we break that down, and we end up with total expenses. Note that we have $360K a year budgeted for 3 years, and then after that, a total of $610K, because once this thing's in orbit, less and less money will have to be spent by the team. It's just about maintaining it in orbit, making sure everything's going right and so forth. And so by the time that's all done, again, almost a one-time cost, about $1.7 million for our expenses. Schedule assumptions, we figured that the lens manufacturer is going to need about a year. The satellite and the bus provider are going to need maybe 3 years, and assuming we can use 1 year concurrent with the lens manufacturer. Assembly for launch, about 2.5 years after the project is initiated. 6 months after that, we're in low Earth orbit. Lunar orbit, figure 6 months after that, although that's assuming even possibly a very low, a different system rather than a rocket system to get there. But the bottom line is we're figuring that in. So total time to launch, 3 years, total time to lunar orbit, 3.5 years. Then we have a payment schedule figured out, and these are the amounts that, for example, a SpaceX or somebody like that's going to want. This is their actual schedule that they want on a time basis, and the total there, as you see, 600K. Then we have the assembly payment schedule, same thing. They're going to have the schedule. They want so much by so much, total $1 million. And then this is the budget. So first year, we're going to basically spend on expenses, launcher, lens manufacturer, satellite bus, and miscellaneous, coming out to $580K. Second year, expenses, orbital plotting, satellite bus, and the launcher, total 1.28 million. Budget third year, we're up to 980,000. Fourth year, 260. Fifth year, 200, and the last year, 150,000. So that's basically thinking that this thing's going to be orbiting for 3 years and maintaining it for that long. Total estimate, $3.19 million, which sounds high. However, that's the prototype. So if you repeat your costs, if you basically, now you proved it, you've got a product, it actually is returning on investment, is making somebody save money or actually making them money. And now you can build them again because you know how to build it. So now your launcher's down to $500K because it's now 6 years later. You're $200,000 for your assembler rather than $1 million, and so forth and so forth. And it comes out, well, now you can build your second one for a mere $1 million. Okay. So that's our argument. That's why we think that that's where we think we should look at going in space. We're a nonprofit. We're a little chapter over here in California, but hey, it's not about us trying to do it. It's about us trying to promote it. And that's basically what I've done here today. I've pushed out an idea. I've tried to promote it to you folks or to the world in general. And I've showcased a couple of really great guys and I mean, kids. You guys are kids to me, sorry. And I think that these two really, really wonderful young people are the sort of the cream of the crop of what India's producing right now. I think you all should be very, very proud of them. I know I am. And with that, I'm going to go back and I'm going to open up this conversation. I'm going to take off. Akil and Krishna, why don't you take off your mics?
Yes.
And I'm going to open this up. We're now at a little 10 after 7, so we've been at this for an hour and 10 minutes. Let's open this up for questions from folks. Okay, Avinash, you're now in control of the meeting.
So shall we start with the questions now?
Yes, please.
Okay. Anyway, thank you very much for the nice presentation. And I was more impressed upon the cost economics of the space solar power. Okay, the solar cells in space and solar cells on ground, are they going to be different?
So,
Yes.
yeah.
And
thank
that's
you,
because
Joe.
one is absorbing solar energy and the ones on the ground will be absorbing laser energy. And Akil can answer why that's different.
So like in the space, when we have broad range of spectra, right? So we have energy at different wavelengths. So we need to make sure the solar cells that are in the space should have a broad absorption spectrum, so that whatever power is converted, right? Whatever the sunlight deposited instant on the solar arrays would be converted. However, when you compare that with the solar cells that are on the Earth while receiving the laser beam, so the laser beam we considered is right because the material is gallium arsenide, so it would be somewhere around like 850 nanometers to 1 micron. So we need to have a solar cell whose band gap, right? So should match with the laser wavelength. So a specific size quantum dot solar cells should be sufficient, which are very different from the one that are there on the space module, to convert all the power that is being transferred from the space module. So these are two different solar cells.
Okay, thank you. What is the beam width of the laser?
So on the space, we have that in few millimeters. By the time it reaches the Earth, so we have that in few meters. So that's the reason we have a huge receiving station there with at least 15 meters diameter, so that it can capture most of the beam that's incident on the antenna.
Yeah, I'm going to actually deal with that as well, because there's one of the things that we in our work on this whole concept, we had to deal with the issue of a very long way to transfer the beam. In our case, 55,000 kilometers from Earth Moon Lagrange Point 1 to the moon surface, and so NASA in their study that I mentioned had decided that that wasn't practical, that the beam by the time it got to the surface of the moon was too big, and they'd have to have much too large a field for a receiver. Well, what a really smart guy who's a member of our chapter pointed out is there's thing called collimating of a laser beam. And what that effectively means is that you can take a laser beam, pass it through a lens, expand it, and then pass it through another lens and if you will, re-straighten it, make it go straight again. And if the bigger that collimating lens is, and it can be a mirror, it can, and in your video, Akil, you were showing it as a mirror. but it can be a lens. Anyway, the bigger the lens is of that collimating lens, then the smaller the target on the moon is. And somehow or other, this had been missed by NASA. They didn't get that point. Well, our friend, who this very smart guy, also said it's quite possible to create a lens that's a thin film lens. You don't have to have a giant thick lens. You can create one that's quite thin and quite light. So we effectively said, you know, let's put a 10-meter lens at Earth Moon Lagrange Point 1 and use that to collimate our beam. By the time it got to the lunar surface, the lens, the diameter was maybe 12 meters across. That's all. So it is possible to have a beam that doesn't spread so dramatically. On the other hand, and back to what you were saying, when you're passing a beam from the orbit of the Earth or from the geosynchronous orbit to the planet's surface, you probably want to have a larger diameter because you don't want to fry birds or people that are in the path of that beam. So you really want to have a large footprint. So that the design that you created for your project, for your desalinization project, was absolutely the best choice. So it's a bit more complicated about how big the beam diameter is. It all depends on how it's collimated and how much it's collimated.
Yes.
Next. Avi, you're on
Right.
mute, Avi.
Will there be any interception or interference from the solar winds in transmission of the laser beams?
I'll let you deal with that, Akil.
So this space satellite, power satellite, is placed within the Earth geostationary orbit or geosynchronous orbit. So I believe so. Most of the cosmic flares or solar flares would be stopped by the atmospheric conditions which are situated around the Earth surface there, right? So you have this small Earth electromagnetic field that protects most of the reflects most of the cosmic and solar flares. So the satellite is well and safely placed within that orbit so that there won't be any damage to its arrays, especially.
And in fact, if you think about the fact we have communication satellites constantly sending, I mean, that's why we have cell phones, for example, things like that. Those electromechanical devices are up there right now and operating perfectly well. So I don't think it's an issue in the space, not with our modern technology.
Yeah. There was one way of transmitting electricity from space to the Earth by way of microwave beam. So what is the difference between a microwave beam and a laser beam?
So do you
Okay,
want
well,
to answer or do you?
sure, I'll really quickly. The microwave is a great idea. It's pretty darned efficient. It's efficient both in terms of the generating of it and in the reception of it. And the laser right now is not as efficient. It frankly maybe 10% the efficiency of a microwave. However, the microwave has to have a really, really, really big receiver. If you're going from geosynchronous to the Earth's surface, you're talking about hundreds of meters across, where the laser can have a much more compact system. But microwave has its place, and nobody's saying that. It's really about the application. For example, the idea of trying to beam energy microwave to a small rover on the surface of the moon, no, that's not going to happen. That's just, the microwave beam is just not condensed enough to be able to do that, at least with our present technology. Akil, if you want to take a shot at that.
Yes, I just want to add a small point to that. So always microwaves can be used, but remember, like when you want to have a different wavelength spectra, like we are moving from microwaves to the optical range. So microwaves would be, the wavelength would be few microns, right? And like few tens of microns, whereas the wavelength of the laser beam would be around 850 to 1 micron. that makes the size of the antenna smaller. The smaller the wavelength, the smaller you can go with a device for the receiving. So when you go with a microwave, you need to have antennas as size as a huge building or something like that. Whereas a laser, you can have an antenna of sizes like 15 meters around diameter.
Yeah. Now, taking a clue from your answer, the question comes, what would be cheaper? A laser technology for transmission, for a space solar power, or a microwave beam transmission for a common man to use it on the earth? Because everything comes to spending from the pocket.
Well, the answer to that is it's all about mass, because in space, everything has to get into space from the planet's surface. And as you know, it just to lift 250 kilograms into orbit would cost $600,000 today. That's a lot, okay? That's expensive mass. So the whole idea is you want to have a system that can reduce the mass as much as humanly possible. And you can do a calculation on that. But again, it's about the application, what you're trying to do and how you're trying to accomplish it. We looked at mass calculations, for example, on the lunar surface, and by far the best solution is the laser when you're talking about a relatively small amount of energy that's being transferred. If you're talking gigawatts, you're probably wanting to look at microwaves. If you're talking about kilowatts, you're probably talking about lasers, if that kind of makes sense a little bit. If you're talking about watts, there's no alternative to lasers, okay? It's the only way to go.
But the future lies for gigawatts and not for kilowatts or simple math.
No, but the future lies for whatever it's going to do, solve the problem that's being asked to be solved. So if you're trying to build a rover on the moon and you're not ready for the giant solar power plant on the moon that's going to store batteries and all the rest of it, that's going to cost, tens of quadrillions of dollars, let's start small and work up. The laser is an introductory pathway, I consider. But a very, very important one. Think of it as what they call a wedge issue. It's like when you want to put and split a piece of wood, you start with a wedge and you hammer that wedge in and it splits the wood. You don't take a sledgehammer to split a piece of wood. You take a wedge. The laser is the wedge issue.
Yeah. Will there be any converter required to convert the electricity from the laser beam to, say, in USA, 110 volts or 230 volts in India?
Well, I'm not enough of an electrician of what's going on in India, but I don't think that's an issue whatsoever. Anytime you have conversions, you're always going to have a bit of a loss. Akil or Krishna, maybe you could answer that question.
Yeah, I will take only two questions now. How many years this will generate energy? The mirror or lens or whatever is there. What is the sustainable life of it? Because the satellites are designed for 1 year or 5 years or something like that. Of course, they go beyond their design life. So what would be the design life of space, solar power, mirror or a lens or whatever it is?
Akil or Krishna?
Yes, so the design we made and based on the technology available back in 2013 and 2014 or previous to that, so we calculated the lifetime of this system to be at least 12 to 15 years, including the most fragile parts based on the literature review and the references we have. And we also calculated the payback period, right? So how much time is required to get all the investment in that. So it was somewhere like 6 to 7 years, or somewhere around that point, you have the break even of all the costs that went into the system. So in that context, at least we have 5 years extra on the system's lifespan.
The last question, laser contains higher radiation. So will it affect the ozone layer?
Go ahead,
Right.
Akil.
Yeah. So yes. So there is a lot of concern about radiations that causing a lot of problem for the ozone, especially if you go with lower wavelength spectra like optical spectra in terahertz frequency or in like few nanometers of wavelength. But the situation is here something like that. So we have few absorption dips within the ozone layer where it allows a specific wavelength to pass through and reflect a specific wavelength so that there won't be any problem to the life on the earth. So where the ozone layer allows, like it acts like a complete uh, glass, like a transmitting everything, most of the transmission in that window. So we consider that window somewhere like 850 nanometers to 1.3 micron, so that most of the laser beam that falls on the ozone layer won't interact or won't get absorbed by the ozone layer, but everything would be transmitted straight through within that window and get instant on the solar arrays placed on the ground.
And I should point out that on the moon, there is no ozone layer. There's no anything.
Yeah, it depends on the application.
So coming to end, thank you very much, Joe, Akil, and a charming lady, Krishna. I don't know how did we miss at ISDC 2018 at Los Angeles, because myself and Joe, we were almost every day we were together. And how did we not meet? Anyway, it's good to meet you here. Thank you very, very much.
And I might say that we are going to have in Los Angeles in 2021 an ISDC, and I hope we'll all meet
hopefully,
there.
Hopefully,
and have a nice time together.
Yeah, hopefully it takes place, because we are not sure about the pandemic, how long it will continue, and whether we will really be able to meet physically. Anyway, thank you very much. So I'm really indebted to all of you, three people, for this very nice and informative illustration and presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. See you.
Yeah, friends, after the question and answers, as every day, we have announcement for tomorrow's program. So tomorrow, Wednesday, 7th October, we have another eminent speaker, Pascal Lee. He is a senior planetary scientist, chairman, Mars Institute, and also he is a director, Houghton Mars Project. And his subject of presentation will be humans to the Mars. Thank you very much. Good night for India and a very good day for California. Thank you very much. And here we end our meeting.
Okay. Bye, Avi.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Akil. Oh, looks like we already
Joe.
lost
Bye,
Krishna.
Joe.
I'm sorry about the sort of hash job I did on my presentation. I thought I had this thing ready, but I just fell all apart. Things did not work like I planned. But oh well, that's life. I think we got the main thing across. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.